print it out and leave it on the printer? I did. Shoot.
We don't know whether William Harris and Michael Loy are going to be able to then.
Oh, I'm actually here, Pat. I'm in. I'm just
We
waiting.
have no idea if Will's going to participate tonight.
We need 4.
We're good. We're good. We're just waiting for others to arrive but we will call the meeting of the Wausau Policing Task Force to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the January 18th meeting. What are your wishes?
I'll
Look
make-
good to me, I move to approve.
I'll
Moved by-
second.
I second that.
Moved by Peck, second by Harris, third by Mike Kemp North. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the minutes will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Discussion and possible action. Before we get into the review of the current recommendations, we sent something out today, and I apologize for the lateness of it, but I took, based on some discussions that I had with the chief and others and looking for clarification, we sent out information earlier today that may have reworded a couple of the things. I'd like to draw your attention to those and see if anybody has any concerns. And now I can't get access to the internet.
Those are the items where there are kind of 2 columns and
Yeah, the one on the left, the second column was what we originally did, and the final column would be proposed changes to the language. And again, it's up to this group, but when I started to look at them from the perspective of presenting the information to the public, it made sense to perhaps go back and revisit them. And if you like the original language, that's fine. But I spelled out some of the terms. In fact, I duplicated some of the words. But the first one is invest in more specific EAP, and I just employee assistance program. I just put define the acronym, because if you work in EAP, you understand what it is. The second change was on the recommended city amend its health plan to enhance mental health benefits for members of the PD. And I changed it to recommend the city amend its health plan to allow police WPD officers to access mental health services with no out-of-pocket expenses. And this is based on discussions that I had with the chief. We would look at a plan design, but I think there are some other alternatives where they can provide services, and I bounced this off of Michael Loy, who made the concept off of Michael Loy, who made the original motion. I think the goal was that we didn't want to create financial barriers to police officers seeking necessary mental health services. And so the first one was not clear as to what it was, and from a practical perspective, it would be difficult to carve out potentially a separate policy for the police department, and I think the goal was to make sure that we had access. So,
your chair?
yes.
John? It seemed to me that a big piece of that, though, was to make sure that the EAP program that law enforcement people received was provided to them by people who had a better background on it than your average provider would. That they wanted to have specific, counseling and such available and be served by people who had some connection or special training or experience.
That would be the first item. Go back to the first item, invest in more specific EAP programs with adequately trained mental health support for officers.
Are we,
That would be that issue. I think we were looking for the adequate training in the first recommendation. The third recommendation is to just accessing mental health services with no out-of-pocket expenses.
yeah.
So I think
That seemed like it could have been more clear. I read it and I thought, if somebody reads that and asks one of us, we will be able to explain what we mean by it. But I wonder if there's some more explanatory language that could make that more clear.
that's
I'm
up.
having a trouble getting this dumb thing up on my screen, so I apologize.
Chief, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think those two items are interrelated. The goal is to remove financial barriers for good quality counseling services for law enforcement officers. So EAP is an outstanding resource because it doesn't cost us anything, but the problem there is we don't have the counselors we believe we need to counsel people specific to law enforcement. And the other piece is we can access a lot of counselors through our health insurance network, but there's a barrier because there's a deductible cost. So I think those are interrelated items that could be one item together where we want to have a no-cost, good counseling services available to law enforcement. So that could be as simple as giving a line item in the police budget for those types of services that we can pay for specific counselors. That we could do that. Actually, we do that already to some degree. We just we don't have a lot in our budget to be able to do that. I have to try and find that. So I think that's the goal, and so those are interrelated items. That's my perspective on that for whatever it's worth.
So any thoughts on combining those? I think, Pat, your point is that if we take them separately, there's confusion as to the quality of the service. And the second one tries to address, again, the issue of access and out-of-pocket expenses. But I think that they do flow together. So I think what we're trying to do tonight is get those to a point where it makes sense and we can take those recommendations to the Police and Fire Commission and ultimately the council and the public. So we can combine those if that's the desire of the task force. So it'd be
I
combining.
don't think they need to be divided or split up, but just as long as we're clear what our objective is, that we realize that the best service to the officers is going to be through somebody who really has a handle on it and has specific abilities.
Excuse me, while I'm trying to capture.
Might be able to be more help, but trying to participate in the meeting via WebEx and look at the material on my laptop that's over here. And darn thing is just doesn't want to load it, so I'll do my best.
So let me throw this out to you. We recommend that the city's EAP program have adequately trained mental health providers, and that access to mental health services be made available to WPD officers at no out-of-pocket expenses. Ben, does that cover it? What do the members think?
Rather than adequately trained, we might want to say specifically trained. Because obviously we want adequate, everybody wants adequate for sure, but we're going for beyond adequate through very good specifically trained people.
And I made that change. Any thoughts?
That works for me.
I'm seeing nods. Because we've got an earlier motion, could we have a motion to combine those two with that language?
I would make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. The only change we made to the support expansion of CART, we just spelled out Crisis Assessment Response Team. I think in our explanation when we present it, there will be more detail. On the recommend Officer Lemeron present on his experiences in transportation services to Metro Ride. I felt as if that wasn't an actionable item per se. I think what we were looking to do is I changed the language to request Metro Ride evaluate services to the homeless population. And the expectation would be that Officer Lemeron would provide his expertise and experiences in there, and that was making sure they had access to services and other things. I don't know what you think of that change, but I think it's more enlightening to the council and others that are considering the policy. Ben, did I capture the intent there with that rewrite? He's saying yes. What are your thoughts?
Do we need to add that request Metro Ride evaluate services to the homeless population, incorporating insights from community organizations, including the Wausau Police Department? Because then it puts some more emphasis there. Metro Ride can evaluate it, but there's nothing in that recommendation that says they have to, that I read, that says clearly the intent of what we're wanting, of what we're designing.
I like it.
All right, that's acceptable. So you would be incorporating insights from community organizations, including the Wausau Police Department. Mike, was that your suggested change?
Yeah. And I'm happy to make that a motion if that
All
is
right.
where we're at.
That's where we're at. Is there a second?
That one for me.
Seconded by Pat. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. I struggled with develop a multimedia approach to a communication policy to address segments of society, be it cultural, race, included. This is the part of it was how we captured it to. So I changed it to develop a multimedia communication policy that addresses all segments of society, regardless of culture, race, or orientation, to foster positive interactions, and perhaps we should put down with the police department at the end. But what are your thoughts? Do you like the original language or the updated one? I was just looking at how you present it to the public.
I think the rewrite is a little more streamlined and understandable, but I do like your idea of adding more positive interactions with law enforcement, or wording to that effect. What
are your thoughts?
I would move to adopt the
Moved by-
wording that you're suggesting with the
With that
verbal
change, yeah.
addition that you just gave.
Okay.
I can second that.
Second by Mike. Any discussion?
Take the I out of segments.
All right, yes, I see that. We'll do the spell
Otherwise,
check.
we're good to go.
All right, any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. I left, conduct a public service campaign alone. Then create a resolution geared toward the legislature to address issues such as commitment and crisis. Request that the legislature clarify law enforcement's role in commitments and crisis services is how I changed that. I don't know if either of them clearly spells out that we're trying to limit the role of law enforcement to that of law enforcement, but that's what the goal is. What are your thoughts? Which one do you prefer?
Seems to me we need to say what we want. And what we want is for somebody else to be involved in commitment and mental health, big decisions like that. So I'm not sure exactly how to do that.
So we were looking for, in particular, with the commitments and the crisis services, to streamline the process where, and clarify the process where law enforcement role is, so that they go to the healthcare center, they're not sitting there for hours waiting for that person to be processed, but there's an exchange and a transfer from the law enforcement community to the crisis workers and others. And I don't know how anybody have any thoughts on how to capture that in, their role and commitment to have law enforcement be law enforcement, and when we do that, pass off to mental health service providers to have them assume more of the role, and part of that is statutory, the statutory framework under 5115 of the statutes. I welcome any thoughts, but I thought that it was ambiguous a little bit about what we were trying to do in the original one. I didn't get it any better, but any thoughts?
I would say I agree with the rewrite. I mean, we're making recommendations in terms of law enforcement. So I think we need to be clear about how, if we're putting a resolution forward to the legislature, what exactly and who exactly we're talking about. So I think as it is best, and to leave it open so that they can, hopefully, if they were to look at it, address multiple issues regarding that.
Okay. So is that a motion to approve the revised language?
Yes, that is a first motion to approve the revised language.
Is there a second?
I would second it, but I'm not sure, couldn't hear all that well, but I'm wondering what the revised language, what we've got on this, in the packet now, or what?
Yes. That it was open-ended. The intent would be, we will probably clarify that in that resolution. And I think we can work with the city when they adopt that resolution, going to the legislature requesting that change. But again, I think we spent quite a bit of time looking at that whole issue of crisis services at 5115, waiting for that medical clearance and trying to figure out where people were going, what law enforcement's role is, whether it's a handoff or whether it's a stay involved until a point certain. I think we were looking for a clearer definition of when that division of labor or responsibility changes, so.
I think we should say that, the goal that, we would like the legislature to work for is to give a larger piece of the responsibility for this commitments and crisis services to mental health professionals, so that law enforcement doesn't look at a 5-hour commitment to get involved in one of these processes.
Well, how would you amend that? And I think we can do that in the when we try to implement that policy, and we can explain it. But we could change the word clarify to limit, if that would address that concern, Pat.
I think you're onto something there, John. I think if you limit law enforcement's role in commitments and crisis services and rely more heavily on assistance or guidance from mental health professionals, I think you'd have it. I think that's where we want to go.
I don't know if we want to, or at least from my end, I don't know if we want to say limit, because I think what we need is to see within what the, legislature's taking this up to see what they come up with. Because I think what's needed is more clarity in terms of how they're supposed to act. They could cut it down and say they do this, do that, but are we going to be stuck with sort of the same issue in terms of really clarifying the defined role of what and how they're supposed to act, what actions they're supposed to take? So I don't know.
You prefer leaving it open-ended and
I
doing this
prefer
then?
leaving it open-ended. If we turn over to the legislature, they do their process, but we're pushing the issue up front, is sort of my take on it, to do something, and that it is an issue.
Are we expecting somebody else to further revise these things, or is this a final product?
Well, we're trying to move toward a recommendation. There may be, in the context of when we roll it out to the public, the need for clarification on what some of these things need, but we're trying to, as best we can, get that language set tonight. We probably will have one more meeting where we look at the final report and advance that to the appropriate parties and do the rollout with the Police and Fire Commission, Public Safety Committee, Council, and public. So
Okay.
I think we're trying to tonight look at the language and make sure that it's actionable and clearer, and where we need to, we can take one more stab at it with the final report, but it would be nice to work through those issues tonight. So I'm hearing Pat has some concern, or some changes, and Will has some concerns. Will prefers to go with the original language in the fourth column. But I don't have, well, I think, did you make a motion? I don't know that I had a second. Or did you?
I think somebody seconded it.
Did you get a
Not
second?
sure.
Mike, you would have been the seconder. Did you second it?
No, I didn't second. I'm sort of in between Pat and William on this. I think the rewrite clarifies some stuff, but I don't know if it necessarily, I mean, when I read clarify law enforcement's role, there's no action to me for that. That to me is just them saying, yep, we clarified it. But to me, it's something of, I think we need to find encourage legislature to something, because right now it's, okay, I'm the legislature, yeah, here, this is the statute, I've clarified it, it's right there. But I think we're looking for a change, and to me, clarify does not mean change.
If I may offer a rewrite? Um, All right, so how about we request that the legislature both clarify and address law enforcement's role with regards to issues such as commitments and crisis services.
Can I throw out a prefix?
Sure.
Concerns have been expressed over the amount of time that officers spend waiting for the disposition of commitments in crisis services / cases. Therefore, we request the legislature clarify law enforcement's role in commitments in crisis services.
I would only add clarify and address to get
Clarify
to that
and
sort
address.
of action point I think Mike was talking about.
I agree with William, I second, if that's a motion, William, I second.
With a prefix?
Yeah, I think the prefix is good, John, I think that adds some background.
Ben, I'm looking to you. Any thoughts?
I'm sorry.
I think we're getting a lot closer. I would vote for this.
So it would read, concerns have been expressed over the amount of time that officers spend waiting for the disposition of commitment in crisis services / cases. Therefore, we request that the legislature clarify and address law enforcement's role in commitments in crisis services.
Go for it.
I'm looking to the chief to see if that addresses.
I think that's appropriate. I think overall, our concern within law enforcement, and I think this is true not just in Wausau, but on a statewide level, is that the process is not streamlined. So, for example, last week we had a number of incidents, a couple of which resulted in, not in emergency detentions, but in hours of our time standing at North Central Healthcare or in the community at a home, waiting on a decision to be made whether or not the person was going to be committed on an emergency detention. So, the process is not streamlined. The individuals responsible for making that decision do not do so in a timely manner all the time. And then of course there's the issue of the transport across the state for not just us, but for a lot of law enforcement agencies because we don't have regional resources. So I think those two things are the issue. We need a streamlined process that allows it to be effective and efficient, and it is not efficient now, the way the law is written or the way the law is implemented within communities. So I think that what you're saying makes sense to me in terms of a motion and what your recommendations would be. I'm not sure I'd be hopeful in terms of what the outcome of that would be. So if you're trying to, enact change, I'm not confident that does much. I mean, we talked to a couple of state legislators just last week about this issue, and we've been talking about it for several years. So hopefully the task force recommendations has, some oomph behind them that maybe I don't have.
Is there an intention to try to get mental health professionals to play a larger role in this process?
I think that's probably, we're trying to limit the role of law enforcement in those services which are not related to law enforcement. I think that the assumption there would be that some of those responsibilities would be shifted to mental health services providers.
Okay. We're good.
So did we have a motion, and Mike, was that a second to this one?
Well, it was a second if there was an actual motion on the table. I was waiting,
Or, Will, was that a motion with that,
Supported.
with that caveat, that intro and your language relative to clarify and address?
Yeah, but now I'm kind of thinking about, I don't want to overinflate the sentence, but I was kind of thinking about, as the chief was talking, inserting after role with the goal of streamlining the process for commitments and crisis services.
If that's a motion to amend, I would second it.
Well, we still have the original, we don't have the formal one before, so one more time?
So everything is, we have changed with the prefix and everything, but after the word role, we say with the goal of streamlining the process for commitments and crisis services.
Are you getting that, Jane?
And then if we could have a reread of the whole thing.
Goal of streamlining. So I have with the goal of streamlining commitment and.
Streamlining the process for commitments and crisis services.
So it reads, concerns have been expressed over the amount of time that the officers spend waiting for the disposition of commitment and crisis cases. Therefore, we request that the legislature clarify and address law enforcement's role with the goal of streamlining the process of commitments and crisis services.
Is that too much?
There you go.
We'll have a final chance to look at it once it's in writing next meeting,
All
so.
right. Then I'll make the motion that we adopt that.
a second.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Then we had the expand the neighbor to neighbor, and this I think it was to work with, maybe I did that, but after talking with the chief, he wanted to keep his options open as to the mechanism by which they did that. So I think what we were looking for is initiate formal dialogue with groups such as the Hmong LBGT and New Refugees. So that would give more latitude. It wouldn't necessarily be the neighbor-to-neighbor concept, but rather would look for just a regular, ongoing discussion with those groups. And again, that was based on, the chief and I took some time to talk through some of these recommendations. Any thoughts, preferences? And that was an issue that I was pushing. I can live with that change.
I would only amend the version you offered to say initiate a formal ongoing dialogue with groups such as Hmong LGBT and New Refugee.
I think that clarifies.
I like it because it allows the chief to find the best way to have interaction and dialogue with each of these groups. It doesn't have to fit the same format, you know. I want to do one thing with one group and one thing in another, and it frees him up to do that.
Any thoughts? Not, could we have a
Do we need to add young adults? Looking at the data sets, one of the things that we aren't able to do is to get an understanding of some of the demographic multi-level. But I wonder, that was one of the populations that clearly was struggling. And can we add that as a descriptor?
It was meant to be illustrative without being exclusive. with the use of the word such as, I think. But if you want young adults in there, we can put young adults in there.
No, I just think because in earlier we highlight that group throughout our conversations, we've highlighted it, and then when we are creating a recommendation, it would then have a response to that highlight. That was would be my.
I would just ask for clarity for purposes of this resolution, though. If we were to add young adults, we'd have to clarify who young adults are, from what age to what age.
Mhm. Well, what are your wishes?
I'm okay with it as is. If somebody has a change to suggest, go for it.
I'm looking for a motion.
I'd move to approve it as worded now, and if somebody wants to work on something, refine it, that'd be fine, but let's put this on the floor.
So,
Can we do a friendly?
so
Can we
we,
change, Pat, can we use William's wording, instead of formal dialogue, the continued dialogue, or? William
Formal
recommends that
ongoing.
you said,
it was
I think-
initiate formal ongoing.
I'm good with
Yeah.
that.
Was that your motion?
I-
And it was moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed, no? That motion carries. All right, now you have the other recommendations which didn't change. Are there any other recommendations that the group would like to put forth at this time? Any other recommendations?
I'll just make a minor wording change on the one where it says, police department should engage each year into some cultural awareness education training. Instead of into, it should probably just be in. Engage each year in.
Okay, we will make that editorial change if that's all right. I think that's more editorial.
Yeah.
Okay. And I do have a slight change to one of them.
All right.
So the one above that one, conduct the community survey and do it every 2 years. I think we should just clarify and say why. Say for the purposes of conduct the community survey and do it every year, for the purpose of evaluating, analyzing progress and improvements, or something along that lines.
I like it.
So purposes of evaluating,
Evaluating progress and improvements.
If that's a motion, you got a second.
I'll make that motion.
okay. Any discussion? If not, all is in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Anything else? All right.
Are we considering the last three now, John? The group?
You're working, where there's nothing in the last column, we're going with the second column. So,
Okay, did we just vote to do that?
well, we've taken action on the other columns at a previous meeting, so I don't know that we need to move those over. Those are the dates, and they reflect the date of the task force making those recommendations. So I don't think we need to do it. What we do need to do now is prioritize. And we can
Okay.
do
So our
that.
last vote was to do a survey, to engage, to continue research, and to advance the resolution. Did all those things with that motion.
That motion carried. So for conduct the community survey and do it every 2 years for the purposes of evaluating progress and improvements.
Very good. Thank you.
So now we're at the point of, do we want to add anything, delete anything? And if there are no additions or deletions or changes, we will then need to prioritize how we are going with these. I'm a little bit leery, quite honestly, given the fact that we're missing 3 members while we have a quorum, on doing the prioritization. I think we can do the prioritization at the final meeting, just it's a reordering. Unless there's an objection, I'd like to save that for the next meeting when the other 3 members are present. I think it would be important to get, that input.
Sounds smart.
I would agree.
All right, so what we may do is, we'll talk to the attorneys, but if we can, maybe send out a survey and ask you to rank order them and to submit them, and then we'll compile that and present that as a illustrative tool for you. So what we'll do is we'll send out the recommendations and ask you to rank them 1 to whatever they are, most important to least important. We'll present that information, we'll have a discussion at the next meeting, so we've got a place to start, if that makes sense.
It does.
All right? All right. Review draft report, which was sent out by the mayor. Do you want to, can we pull that up? You've got it. I will comment that at the last meeting, you asked for an acknowledgement section. There was an acknowledgement section in there. That was, it's there for a placeholder if people have changes and recommendations, but I provided that to the mayor and she incorporated it into the draft. You had asked, I think, Pat, you had asked me to take a stab at it, and that's that stab. And I think I'd like to spend some time just on the acknowledgement, if we can, and then go through the balance of the report. Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Hello, Michael. Like we went through, we reworded, wordsmithed some of the recommendations, which we'll send out to you, but because we were missing, you were late, and Sarah and Kaylee aren't here, what we're going to do is send out all the recommendations and ask the members to rank order them, submit them before the next meeting. We'll bring it back in, we'll have the discussion on the priorities.
Sounds more efficient.
And we'll go through it that way. So we're just starting the report. We're looking at the acknowledgement to see if we captured the thoughts, if there were any thoughts on the acknowledgement. And then we'll run through some of the rest of the report, and then we'll work on our rollout strategy. So any thoughts on the acknowledgement? Did we capture?
I think your first stab was a good stab. I think you captured it pretty well.
Any thoughts? Any thoughts? And again, we'll have an opportunity to, as we deal with the final version, which I hope is a short meeting, next meeting. So, Katie, then do you want to run through the report? Thank you, and Katie spent a lot of time, we've been talking, but most of the efforts have been hers, and there's still work to be done.
I'm struggling with making this look like something that you can actually read here. Okay. Well, okay. All right. We're starting on page 2 with your acknowledgement. I don't know if you have anything that you want to share specifically with this, but I know that we felt strongly about making sure that we shared that the majority of the feedback we received was quite positive, and that we have some really great policies already in effect. So I don't know if you want to. I'm seeing some typos already that we will go ahead and correct. Oops.
And we can correct, yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that was front and center because this body seemed to be pretty strong about that. I think we've gone through some of this stuff already, but we wanted to make sure folks knew why we even did this. So we wanted to make sure that we were responding to our community's questions about our policing policies, but we didn't want to be reactive. We saw cities 2 years ago rushing to make decisions that maybe hurt residents or changed what they were doing. So we saw some immediate changes, and we didn't want to be that way. But we also wanted to make sure we continued that vision of excellence. That was something that came throughout all of our surveys and groups. You all have seen this, kind of our timeline. I'll be updating it with the meetings that you've had that I haven't noted. Oh, citizen oversight. We'd kind of talked a little bit. This has been updated. The different roles of the various oversight bodies. So we have the Police and Fire Commission. We all know that this is a statutorily required board, and it's civilian oversight. So we already have that. But we also have public health and safety. This is where we talk about the policies that we want the police and fire department to enact and enforce. And then obviously mayor is that kind of third leg of the oversight stool, day-to-day oversight and management. So this is just kind of describing how we went through our process. We wanted to do a deep dive. We wanted to make sure that we were meeting our community's needs, expectations, and those assumptions that we all kind of talked about. And then we just also wanted to make sure that we're not done. We still have work to do. There are some challenges ahead that we probably still need to work on, or at least the City Council, Police and Fire Commission, and I need to work on after you guys make your recommendations. This is all familiar to you. This is the authorizing resolution. These are the duties prescribed in that authorizing resolution. This should all seem very familiar with it, for you. This is what you've been doing for the last 18, 20 months. There are your faces. Here are meetings. We'll be updating these, but I mean, really, you guys have dedicated so many hours to this inquiry and discussion. Thank you so much. I should include an acknowledgement of that. Thank you for your work here. Make sure that we're all updated here. All right, this goes through our process. Listening sessions, we had a community survey, focus groups, data capture and analysis. Pay no attention, we're clearly not on page 7, but I'll be updating all of that in the final comb through. So, data here. This is what we did. Good work, everyone. more details about the survey. You know, we did go with WIPs, and they designed it to be, to give us insights that we asked for, so more details. So findings, we found that these were the top findings from WIPs. They outlined these. So this is some of the new stuff that we haven't necessarily talked about as a group outside of that meeting, but majority of respondents to the survey were satisfied, although we did find that young, non-white, non-heterosexual, non-homeowners expressed more negativity about law enforcement across the board. There was kind of this 50-50 split on whether or not the level of safety has changed in Wausau. We didn't really give them a time frame, but people maybe are reflecting. Mental health and addiction resources are a top priority in our community. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. We spent a lot of time talking about this. Recruiting quality candidates is critical. Community gets their information. We asked how they got their information, and so it's all over the board, but social media and other news sources. It changed based on age and demographic, but in general, social media news, that's how we get our news, all of us. And then the majority of respondents rated their interactions with police in the past year as favorable, even the people that maybe had some tough times. So the main issues that we kind of covered, mental health services, officer wellness, cultural competency. I added another one as we moved through I split out officer wellness and training because it seemed like those two could be split out a little bit. Pay no attention to the way this is laid out, but these are the things we've talked through. So mental health services, we want to make sure that we are supporting an expansion of CART. That seemed clear from day one. And we'll make sure that everyone knows what CART is, the Crisis Assessment Response Team. It's our partnership with the Sheriff's Department and North Central Healthcare. Homeless outreach services, that's something that we piloted over the last year and a half. We really found that to be meaningful, and we found successes there, but we do probably need to transition that to the right place. So that might include a social worker, and I think that was one of your recommendations. Community-based case management service. This is something we'll be requesting of another governing body of North Central Healthcare. We wanted them to continue this strategy so that we're managing these issues that connect all of us from where they commence. And then we also noted that we need support from our state legislature. So we would like their help in addressing issues related to commitments, involuntary commitments, and crisis services. I don't think any of that sounds unfamiliar, but good rundown. Human services, we talked a little bit, this is very specific, I think, based on the last round of recommendations, but we would like to hear more about transportation services related to Metro Ride and how that seems to be adding to some of the issues for folks either who are homeless, can't drive, those things. I think we'll probably polish that recommendation a bit.
We did
Yep.
earlier tonight.
You did
so.
it. I think I had stepped out for a moment, so thank you for that. I will update it. Data collection. I think we all found this meaningful, but we would like to continue this. We don't want to start this and just stop. We'd like to continue doing this. I think, did we determine maybe every 2 years was the recommendation, but I'll make sure to get what you've recommended in here. We want to continue. Officer wellness. So we want to make sure that we are investing in a very specific for law enforcement EAP program so that we can address specific mental health support for officers. We know that being a police officer is a different kind of a job than being a mayor or being an office worker or whatever it is. So there's some very specific traumas they're encountering every day, and we want to make sure they're healthy in mind and body.
Again, we will need to incorporate the revisions from
we-
combining those two.
We'll definitely get on that this week. So we want to continue expanding and investing in resources that improve that mental health training. We spent a lot of time talking about how our officers interact with folks and what the training is, so we want to make sure we're doing the right things. And then the last one I have on here, is recommending that the city amend the health plan to enhance the mental health benefits. That's kind of related, but just, I think we all are on the same page here. We want to make sure that that's in there. Training. So we want to make sure that we have cultural awareness training each year. We want to make sure that we support legislation for an ethics board. I don't know that this falls on training, but probably does. If we support an ethics board for law enforcement, we should probably train on what specifically the criteria are. And we would like to not be the only department that is holding ourselves to this high standard. We want everyone in the state to benefit from the work we've done here. And then finally, we would like officers to kind of dive into some of the uniqueness of our region, and also our neighbors who speak different languages. So thinking through what that looks like, learning various commands in different languages, or maybe even just greetings. We're there. Cultural competency. We've talked a little bit about what do we need in order for our community to understand what we're doing. So we would like on-call interpreter service, proactively letting the public know that this is available. We heard from folks who had been doing the work, whose friends waited for them to be off work so that they could bring them here to City Hall or to the police department or wherever they are to interpret for them. We want them to know that we're here for them and they can come here and get services and they don't have to rely on that friend. All right, community engagement. We talked a lot about this last time about a multimedia approach to communication. We're pretty good on social media. We're doing some other things related to our newsletter, but we want to make sure that we're going all over the place where our people are, so that we can meet them where they are. I think that was the big point of the multimedia approach, is that we want to be where they are and not just in certain places where they could find us. We would like public service campaign, talking about how to achieve positive outcomes. I think we wordsmithed this a couple different ways, how we would like to, on the one hand, ensure that we're doing right, but we also, maybe there are folks that don't know how to engage with an officer. It can be probably scary to get pulled over or something, so making sure people know what to expect if that happens to them. This is what you just talked about regarding outreach to the Hmong, the LGBTQ community, our new refugee population, making sure that our neighbor-to-neighbor program or, just our neighborhood meetings are inclusive of all of our neighbors, not just maybe the neighborhood groups that have been kind of up and running for a while. We've done a really great job with those groups, and I have no question we'd be able to do even more with these other folks. And then, again, this survey, we would like to continue it every 2 years so that we can continue growing and learning what our community's needs are. We're not surprised. And I think if we build that right into what we're doing every year, every 2 years, we get somewhere. And we'll be able to distinguish trends over time and needs that change. Recommendations. This is where we'll put the specific recommendations that we want the city of Wausau to undertake. As we've wordsmithed some of the others, I'll be putting these in here in recommendations. And I think, I've gone back and forth with Chair Robinson about this, about what are the anticipated outcomes. Is that something that we should be pushing onto the council, or should we tell them that maybe they need to consider that? I think that's on this, we can decide that. Same with other agencies. We have partnerships with North Central. We have partnerships with the county. We have partnerships with Catholic Charities and NCAP and all these different. I'm expecting us to probably have these things buttoned up where we need to work together. And I think we have the data to support these things that we're pushing for other organizations, but we'll make sure that we get them too. Issues that need more study. I think that's something we've discovered, especially when it comes to the folks who are maybe hesitant about interacting with police. Younger folks, people who maybe just are nervous culturally, or there's stuff that needs more study, and probably even mental health that we've covered a lot, probably more. And things will change. Public. We talked about what we want to share with the public, because We can tell our people what to do all we want. We can change our policies internally and externally, but we need the public to also come along with us. And I think they've told us in our surveys and our focus groups and everything we've done that they do want to be a partner in this. They don't want to just be, left on the side to guess at what we're doing. So this is where we'll make sure that the public understands their social responsibility too. Appendix, we're going to have a ton of great information in the appendix. You've seen all the policing task force studies. We have links to the various other studies that you've all looked at. That includes the 21st policing survey, the president's survey. We had the Wisconsin Professional Police Association. We went over a lot. It'll all be in here for the people that want to dig in. And including our own stuff, including links to videos and things like that. More appendix, acknowledgements, thank you again. And I think that's it. You can let me know if we're missing a part of this presentation that you want to include, in addition to the information that we're missing.
Again, it's a high-level review of the task force work. Doesn't have all the details, but I think sometimes if you put all the detail in, it doesn't get read. And I guess, again, I think we had talked about a high-level report versus the detail, and I thought the consensus of the task force was that you preferred the high level. Is that still the consensus? I'm seeing nods, yes. And so are we missing, again, we'll have to have we'll have to put an additional page in there relative to the priorities, reflecting the action that we take at the next meeting. We'll have to wordsmith those recommendations and the findings based upon the action that we took tonight. But are you overall comfortable with the flow of it? Mike's nodding yes. Michael, go ahead, Michael.
Well, first I want to say thank you to the mayor and Chair Robinson and Chief Bill Woodman for all the work that you guys did on this. It looks really nice. It's coming together really well. As we've worked through the pieces of some of these individual recommendations and discussions, as you start to bring it into the whole, I certainly have other thoughts about, areas that maybe we can address. And the word that keeps coming back to me right now, and it's the word dependencies. As we look at the recommendations in the report, there are a number of recommendations that, sometimes, a recommendation comes from a deficit-based perspective, like there's a gap that we're trying to close. The word I keep using, dependency, for me is really thinking about we are dependent on the quality of the county's mental health system for the amount of time that our officers spend engaged in mental health issues in the community. We're dependent on the state to create a system where officers that have, terrible conduct and shouldn't be in the profession, that there's a system that can remove them and that they don't end up in another department without, people knowing that history. And the dependencies on the transportation system. I don't understand all the issues that Officer Lemeron said, but the other one that came to mind was the dependency or the correlation between the amount of time that we spend on training and the quality of our police force, the amount of time that we spend reviewing and how often we update policies and make sure that they're contemporary with modern policing tactics. Those are like dependencies. Like we are of the quality department we are today because of a number of decisions that were made along the way. And I think that at some point I may come back to this idea that, if we want to continue this and we want to be in a similar position 5-10 years from now when the world continues to change, what are the things that we need to keep doing? What are the things that the council needs to keep supporting in terms of our law enforcement department? So I know a number of our recommendations might touch on those things. And so as we prioritize those and think about it and finalize this, I may come back to that thought. But overall, I think this is really, really quite comprehensive without getting mired in too many details.
I really like what you mentioned. One of the things that helped me in previous careers is looking through these items and thinking about what do we need to do more of? What do we need to stop doing? And what can we maybe reallocate to other folks? And maybe that's part of what we do, stop, yellow, green kind of coding.
I think, Michael, you raised a good point, and we can take a crack at trying to get a slide in there on those dependencies. And what I heard was the quality of the county's mental health services statewide system for tracking disciplinary action, transportation services, training time, and quality of training time, and its impact on quality of service, and the commitment to review policies on a regular basis. I don't know if I captured them all.
Yeah, I think that for the community to expect a high-quality policing, our department, we need to have support of our council, we need to have support of our county, we need to have the support of our state in specific ways. So calling that out, I think in a slide might just be helpful. Because at some level, some of these recommendations are embedded in categories, but really they're out of the control of the span of even the city council. And they do impact our ability to be successful.
Other thoughts?
I mean, I'll just briefly say I agree with everything Michael said, and I do also take this opportunity to thank the chair and thank the mayor as well for compiling this report. I think it is exactly the way in which we should move forward, and it's easily understood. I think it'll be easily understood by the average citizen. And I think this is the right way to go, and not getting too detailed and too long, because then, our goal is for people to understand, to be able to be educated on some of these things, and to feel like they're part of the process. And I think this captures that pretty well.
Mike or Pat?
Good.
I think that we've captured the stuff. I think that I like the report. And I think I'm excited to see us moving forward.
All right. All right, we will then wordsmith it, and thank you, Mayor, for your effort on that. And again, it'll be presented to you for one final review at the next meeting, incorporating the changes, updating the meeting schedule, and capturing those dependencies and filling in some of those pages. So we will have one more opportunity to look at it. So the rollout, we'll have one more meeting. We'll probably need, what I'd like to do is give you a few days to look at the final report. And I think realistically, if we could have until early next week to send the final report out, that would be helpful to just make sure we've crossed. What we'd like to do is cross-check all the references and making sure we've got everything right, so when it goes out, it's as near complete as possible. So I'm looking to the mayor. If we could get the report out to you by the 9th, could we then look for a meeting the following week? And
So you want me to email, if I get it to you on the 9th, then, okay, perfect. I just need a weekend for sure.
yeah. So February 9th, we would have it. Then I would look to the committee to meet either on we're not going to meet on the 14th. We're going to try to save as many marriages as we can. So we would look at either the 15th or the 16th. 15th is election, so we're at the 16th. Would the 16th, Wednesday night, the 16th, work for members?
At what
Good for me.
time? 6:30 or 7?
We could do it earlier if that,
I can't do it earlier.
Okay.
My preference would be, well, I guess I could get here by 6:30, but my preference would be 7. Is that too late for everybody?
No.
So I can do a 6:30.
We can do 7.
Yeah, I have a similar schedule that night as I had tonight, so I wouldn't be until a little after 7.
So should we look at 7, or we could look at a different night?
Let's go for
7
7.
works for me.
All right, we'll plan on 7. Next night is county board, so we'd be in the following week. So the 16th at 7, we will meet, and that will be our wrap-up meeting. Then we need to, once it's finalized, we'll work on a letter or an email of transmission to probably the mayor and the police, and to Will, you, and to the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and to others. We need to have a public meeting. Do we want to do that before? We really haven't talked about it. Before we take it out to others, or in the process of taking it out? And so do we? Pat, any thoughts?
I like the idea of presenting to the public bodies in terms like Police Fire Commission and Public Health and Safety, and then broaden it to the community. That would make the best sense for me, but not sure.
I agree with Pat on that.
Okay. So what is public health and safety, or public, when do they meet?
The third Monday.
Public Health and Safety is third Monday, so
Yeah, on the 21st of February, you get both the Police and Fire Commission in the morning and then Public Health and Safety in the evening.
well,
Well, if we don't have any changes, we can probably wrap it up. You know, we can meet that deadline. So
excellent.
we'll plan on taking it to them on that date. Then we need to run it through your department as well. So is there time in that, when it would be, we had talked about running it through the police department so that the officers aren't caught off guard with our recommendations.
I would say that we, excuse me, we would need 2 separate times probably. And if we wanted to pick either maybe a Tuesday, Wednesday, so we have different off-day groups working, or maybe a Thursday, Friday, something like that. And then whatever time is convenient for you, I would just invite our department to each of those times, and anybody who's off duty can come in, and we would pay them to be there.
So if we went with the 22nd and 23rd of February?
Yeah, I think tentatively that's fine. I'll take a look at the schedules tomorrow and see if there's anything that conflicts with that, but
And then we would look for, after that, would we present it to the public? Would you prefer that we present it to the public before a council meeting?
It'd be a mayor call, I think.
I mean, your authorizing resolution does say that you'll hold a public hearing. It doesn't specify before or after. So there is a meeting on the 22nd and another one on the 8th of March. So, I mean, maybe the 8th is where all of I don't know.
I think the council might prefer to hear it and be able to ask questions about it before it is trotted out for the general public, but I'm not sure.
Well, we can do the hearing at any time. My problem is that the Tuesdays are my meeting day for the county.
Yeah.
And it's pretty tough for me to squeeze in a lot more meetings.
If there's anyone that can do it, it's you, but I recognize your challenge.
So if the desire was to take it to the council, we could present it to the council potentially on March 8th. We could look at a hearing either later that week or the following week. The 16th of March would be a potential date. It'd be a Wednesday. Tentative dates, and we'll send this schedule out. All right.
I just wanted to make one note of the Police and Fire Commission meeting. Obviously, the president is here, but my understanding is that meeting on the 21st, there's a couple of closed session items and in our normal business. So I just wanted to put that out there just in case there was a concern about time, how much time we're going to commit to that Police and Fire Commission meeting on the 21st. So just my thoughts.
Why don't we defer to the Police and Fire Commission to get back to us whether that's acceptable. If not, I think it's important that we get out that week. We could look for a different date, and potentially if you could, I've got 3 members of the Police and Fire Commission in attendance, we could look for a different date that week. I want to make sure that they have adequate time to review what we are presenting and ask questions, and their input is critical for both for understanding and implementation. So
Police and Fire Commission might want to have a special meeting to hear this and react to it. Not sure.
Yeah, I'll get with you, John, after the meeting on that.
Sure. All right. Any other thoughts on rollout? Now, one of the things, I think, Mike, you were the one that suggested that we do a little video and put it on the webpage. I think we could do that in advance of the public meeting. We'll rely on the city and their videographer to capture the high points. I think a couple-minute video would, if we can get that, we can talk about that a little bit more at our next meeting. Is that still the thought? I think that's an excellent idea.
It'll be good.
All right. We've got our next meeting date. We've got the agenda for it set. We've got a rollout schedule. We'll send out the revised recommendations and ask that you prioritize those. And we will, it'll be a draft prioritization with the final prioritization being made at the meeting, but we'll at least have the collective thoughts of the members to make that process easier, and we can then focus in on that final report and go from there. Anything else that you'd like to bring before us tonight? Anything else? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
I'll make a first motion to adjourn.
Moved by Will, seconded by Michael. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Hey.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you all.